Many of us here at Extra Credits love history, and love historical games, so it's weird that we've never really talked about them. Well, seeing as how we have just relaunched Extra History, now seems as good a time as any. There's a lot we could go over here, but there's two large questions which surround the making and the playing of history games that come up more often than anything else. How accurate should they be, and can you actually learn history from them? Luckily for us, the questions kinda go hand in hand, don't they? You see, both of these questions and all the debates surrounding them stem from the same key fact. You can never be truly historically accurate in a game because, by its very nature as an interactive experience, in a game, the player can change the outcome of history. To me, this isn't really a big problem because that concern comes from an older, slightly narrow view of what it means to learn history. Basically, you can boil it down to the question, is the point of history to learn dates, names, and facts, or to learn from history, and to understand the struggles of people in the past so that we may better make decisions in our lives today? If you believe the value of history is in the former, then the value of historical games are questionable at best. But if you believe it to be the latter, well then historical games may well be one of the best ways to learn history. Games like Rome 2 Total War, Victoria 2, or even Civil War 2, apparently we're on the second generation of a lot of historical games, for all they strive for historical accuracy, they can never ensure that the player's actions will mirror actual events, but they can put the player in the shoes of somebody wrestling with the large-scale problems of the day, and ask the player to understand them, and come to grips with them themselves. This is the very heart of history. Those moments, those pivotal points where someone stands at the precipice of a decision that could change their world and has to make a decision about it. And those games let us live that again and again. Better still, they let us learn from our mistakes, which to me is the very goal of learning history in the first place. These games force us to reflect on the decisions we make and weigh whether they were ultimately correct in a way that's often difficult with just a book or a lecture. So yeah, you can learn from history by giving it through a game, but given that, how accurate should these games be? Well, that's a much trickier question because I tend to find that many historical games focus their accuracy in the wrong places. I mean, it's important to make sure that everybody has the right colors on their shields and that the tanks are the correct ones for whatever year you're in, and it's even more important to make sure that historical figures and situations are represented as honestly as possible. But all of that should simply come with the territory. If you're making a historical game, everybody involved should be reading and studying this time period you're working with. Not just the designers, everybody on the team. Because this should be a labor of love, and if everybody on the team is immersed in that era, all those tiny details should just naturally sort themselves out. Somebody on the team is going to catch the historically inaccurate horns on the helmet or the comically short Napoleon. But where we often fail to apply accuracy is in giving the player the very questions and problems that people at that time struggled with. Often we use history merely as a skin, and then leave the player to make purely gamey decisions within that setting. What do I mean? Well, I'll pick on Rome 2 a little bit here, because despite its bugs, James really enjoyed that game, and the first Rome Total War serves as an excellent contrast for this. You see, in Rome 2, they added leveling trees to all of your characters so you could pick what skills they learned as they gained levels and progressed. Whereas in the first Rome, you could only influence how your units developed, making sure they didn't end up lazy or as a drunkard by sending them out into the field, or reining in their temper by making them administer a town rather than fight in constant battles. But even these actions could sometimes backfire spectacularly. The thing is, this second system where people just developed as they developed, with at best a nudge from the player in the right direction, felt much more like being the head of a Roman family. Struggling to make do with the inept brother that you're cursed with, or having to pack your son off to the army before his scandalous reputation brought down the family, mirrored the decisions a paterfamilias would have to wrestle with as they tried to grow the strength of their family in the world of Roman politics. By having the player be able to make every choice on a leveling tree in the new game, the player made only game decisions. Is this ability or that one more likely to win me the game? Rather than having to work through a real aspect of the period and live a part of history. And, the game was less engaging for that. And I get it, the designers tried to throw in leveling trees because it worked in the multiplayer of their last game, and, well, games have leveling trees. Wouldn't the player want to be able to choose what abilities they got to use? But in doing that, although they paid great attention to accuracy in terms of the names and places in the world, the equipment the soldiers were using and all that, they let slip, to me, what is perhaps the most important accuracy of all in a historical game: mechanical accuracy. If the mechanics of the game don't feel like being there in that time, or in the shoes of those people, if they don't present to you the problems that somebody in the role you're ostensibly taking on might have to face, then you aren't playing a historical game. You're playing a shooter or a strategy game with a historical skin. So that about wraps it up for us today, but I'd like to put out a plea for historical games in other genres. Today we've mostly talked about strategy games, as the majority of historical games currently fall into that category. Beyond those, there's a good handful of shooters, a few action titles, and then almost nothing. Role-playing games seem perfect to take on historical settings. City Sims used to delve deep into this genre with things like the Caesar series, but not anymore for some reason. So if you're thinking about making a historical game, we'd just like to ask that before you immediately slap it into the strategy box, think about what genre would allow you to use mechanics that truly enable the player to explore the period. Now, don't get me wrong, we love strategy games, we love shooters, please keep making those too, but there are so many other aspects of history that are just waiting to be explored. See you next week.